Hi, everyone. This is the Leadership with Heart podcast, and this is Heather Youre, your host. Employee experience and retention is powered by emotions. Managers and or leaders within organizations get to choose which emotions they unleash from within the people they lead. Leaders, meaning supervisors or above in an organization, drive much of the positive or negative emotions by their actions or inactions, their words, or what they fail to say. When a manager chooses their words and their actions carefully, they exhibit great emotional intelligence. These managers are often thought of as leaders who care, or as I like to call them, leaders with heart. This special brand of leader drives engagement and loyalty simply by being themselves. Are these leaders perfect? Absolutely not. It is in their awareness and sharing with some of their imperfections that we realize their brilliance. In this podcast, I ask you to see yourself from the stories my guests tell about the times when they were not the best versions of themselves, but how they used their hearts to guide them to a place of deeper connection with their teams and heightened leadership prowess. Before we get started, I wanted to remind you to follow us on Twitter at Customer Fanatics. That's customer and then Fanatix. And also just follow me on LinkedIn at Heather Youre. That is because I'm in the process of writing a book based upon this podcast, which will have amazing stories of those on the show. And I'm going to be going a little deeper too, so you will not want to miss it. But I'll be putting out tidbits, asking for feedback related to the book cover and just ideas and colors. I want you to be a part of that. I want you to lend your voice to that. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter at customerfanatics.com, and you'll get a couple freebies as well, including the first chapter to my book and some emotional intelligence tips as well. Thank you so much for listening, and hopefully you enjoy this show. Hi, everybody. This is Heather with the Leadership with Heart podcast, and today I'm super excited to have Steve McIntosh on the phone with me. I invited Steve on. Actually, he was referred to me by a very close friend of mine, and I know this friend knows what this show's about and the main themes. And so I know he thought that Steve would be a great addition. So I'm hoping that the listeners you got to pay a lot of attention because his background is super diverse. And I think that the answers to his questions are going to provide a whole nother level of, I wouldn't say complexity, but just a whole nother level for us to be thinking on when we think of leadership. So welcome, Steve.
Great. Well, thanks so much for having me. And I really hope that Apple has started adding subtitles to its podcasts, just in case any of your listeners have a hard time with my accent. But I'm married to a gal from Minnesota, so I'm used to communicating with North Americans.
Well, I'm not sure. Minnesota and Scotland, those are two kind of complicated. It can be very complicated.
It can. That's why we met halfway. We live in the Cayman Islands, and she doesn't want to live in Scotland. I wouldn't mind living in Minnesota, but here we are.
Oh man, Cayman Islands, all those places. Scotland is on my next list after Italy. So
it's a
Scotland, Ireland, London. Oh yeah,
it's a great place to visit, and it's a great place to come from.
Oh, that's great.
I just wouldn't want to live there.
Oh.
Don't tell Scotland I said that.
So where are you right now anyway in your leadership journey?
Well, I mean, I don't think you never reach the end of it. And I think the day that you reach the end of your leadership journey is the day you should retire. But it's just you never quite know where it's going to take you. I recently signed up to do an MBA at the University of Oxford. So I'm sort of and I'm only 4 months into a 21-month program. It's an executive MBA.
Wow.
So I find myself at an interesting crossroads. It's almost like being at the start of a new path. I've been CEO of my own firm for 15 years now. We have 25 staff here in the Cayman Islands. We do recruitment and HR consulting. So I didn't have any particular need to do an MBA. I'm really just doing it for fun and to see where it's going to take me. But I just think in leadership, every day is a new learning experience, and you're never quite there. But I love to challenge myself, and I love to learn. I read a lot, and I love talking to other leaders. And so I'm humbled to be on your show, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Well, okay, so I'm curious to know that 25 staff that you have. How would they describe your leadership style?
Do you know what I think? I think it's changed a lot over the years, and Like anything else, you learn from your mistakes. I think when you start out as a leader, and this certainly applies to me, my first leadership experience was early 2000s. I was working for KPMG, the accounting firm. I'm a recovering accountant, you might say, because I'm nowadays I think of myself more as an HR professional. But when I was first promoted into a management job, that was early 2000s. Like I said, no one, had a conversation with me to say, you're a leader in this organization now, and here's what that means. And looking back, I really wish they had. I'm not sure I would have listened, but I wish they tried because it might have helped me avoid some of the mistakes. And I think I made my transition as a leader as a well-trodden path in a way, because I started out thinking that my job as a manager, as a boss, was to tell people what to do. And it didn't work. And I was like, what's going on here? Why are you not doing what I'm telling you to do? Because I'm a manager, and I think it dawns on you eventually that approach just doesn't work. And so my approach to leadership these days is to not to tell people what to do, but to agree what needs to be done, and to make sure they have the resources and the support they need to be able to do it well, and to continue a conversation with them about what their goals are and what we can do as an organization to help them achieve their goals. And I think if you do that, then you have staff who are happy and advancing in their careers and developing professionally and mastering their craft. And those are the things that make people happy. I don't get hung up on how people do things anymore. I don't try to enforce standards on people. We agree results at the highest possible level, and then I help them reach that target.
I love that. Well, that's definitely more of an enlightened view. You can tell that's an evolution.
I just think leadership is changing. I just think that, the command and control style of leadership, that worked at one time. I think it worked in the boomer generation because people had seen tough times in society. They'd gone to war, and they'd been used to some level of adversity, and they'd been used to following instructions. Maybe education was slightly different, so it didn't encourage as much free thinking and as it does today. But nowadays, because people come out of university and they're very smart, and they're taught to think freely, and they expect to do that in their job. If you just go in trying to tell people what to do, they might do it in the short term, but it's going to lead to all kinds of problems, conflict, and a lack of autonomy. People are just going to leave. Whereas if you just agree what needs to be done and let them get on with it, it doesn't always work out, but it's at least when it does work out, they're happy, and over time you end up with a team that is high performance.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Where does your drive to lead come from? To have the company and be the CEO for as long as you have. Where does that come from? Is it from when you were a child? I'm curious to know where it comes from.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be lying to you if I said that. It's interesting. We've got a running joke here in our recruitment firm that every candidate always says it's not all about the money. And by the end of the process, when they actually get an offer, it always turns out to be about the money. And I think I'm at the point in my career where I can say that for me right now, it's not all about the money, but that's because I've worked my way up Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you like, and I'm at the self-actualization and making the world a better place point of my career and my life. But I recognize that I'm one of the lucky ones who can afford to have that outlook. When I was earlier in my career, I think it was just it was material desire that drove me. I had my first job at the age of 11 years old, delivering newspapers in rainy Scottish streets. And from the age of 13, I was working 4 hours every morning delivering milk in the pouring rain and snow. And looking back, I cannot believe that I did that. I mean, I look at my own kids who are 10 and 11 now, and it's hard to picture them getting up at 3:30 a.m. to deliver milk bottles to frozen Scottish doorsteps. But it may happen. But I was sort of blessed in a way with a lot of stamina and a hardy work ethic. But it was born of a desire that I just wanted to buy stuff that my parents weren't willing to buy me, and so I think they did me a huge favor and it was partly to do with our circumstances growing up. Not that they didn't provide for me. We had everything we needed. We just didn't have everything I wanted.
Yes.
Anytime you find yourself with your desires that outpace someone else's ability to provide for it, then you have to step up and make it happen yourself. And that's what I've always done. And so, so I think I've changed, and I've realised that not everyone is like that. I've also been blessed with a certain amount of hyperactivity. I'm always working on some new project, and I try and fit the projects that I love to do around the ones I need to do, which are mostly work related. Last year, I wrote a book about HR called The Employee Value Curve, which you can find online, by the way. And the year before that, I wrote a series of animated videos about how the Cayman Islands economy works. So I always have some passion project ongoing. Right now, it's my executive MBA, and that's I don't even know where that's going to take me, but I'm interested to find out.
That's great. I have some people might call us ADD when we are moving around that passion project, but I think the key is how do we continue to live our best selves, and the more that we are able to do that just in our own space, we can lead our families better, we can lead our workplaces better, and we can lead the community better, right?
Yeah, you're just going to burn out if you try and just live the life that everyone else expects you to lead, and you don't have enough time to do the things that really make you happy and fulfilled. Then it's not sustainable. And I would encourage everyone in my office, and we're very flexible with people pursuing their own passions, and it's just you have to accept that. In fact, you have to encourage it, I think, to have a successful organization.
Has there been a time, and if it could be something maybe in the last 5 years, it would be even better. But has there ever been a time when you just weren't, very proud of yourself as a leader? You had kind of, again, you got to the point where you're more enlightened, and you kind of let go more, and you let other people, to help with driving the bus. And is there something in the last 5 years where you're just like, I went way backwards on this one. I was not my best self. And then if you do have that story, if you can be specific, and then also what did you do to come out of that, to kind of get back to the place where you are right now?
Yeah, there's a story I'd love to share, which I talk about in my book, which is about a former employee of ours, and it was a real turning point for me as a leader. But this guy was with us, and he was doing pretty well. So he was a recruitment consultant. He was early 30s. He was living really high on the hog here in the Cayman Islands. He was making great money. He had a great lifestyle. And one day he resigned out of the blue, and I was thrown for a loop. It was completely out of the blue. I hadn't expected it. And on his last day, we sat down to do an exit interview, or what passed for an exit interview in those days. And I just wanted to know why had you resigned? And it turns out that he was really indignant about not having been offered the opportunity to run a new office that we were planning to open at that time. And I was baffled, because I just thought this is the last guy I would have chosen for that kind of responsibility. He leaves every day at 5 p.m. He never offers to help, never comes to me with an idea or a problem. He doesn't help colleagues. He's not really a team player within the office. And worst of all, he's never ever expressed this desire to advance within the company until this day. So in my mind, he hadn't checked any of the boxes that would be required for that kind of advancement opportunity. And yet, in his mind, he was the natural choice. And at first, I went away from this discussion thinking, man, what an idiot. I just thought, why? He just doesn't get it at all. And it wasn't. And I reflected on this for weeks and weeks. And eventually I realized it wasn't him that was the idiot. It was me. Because I had this checklist of things that I expected people to do. in my own mind. And I'd never just sat down with them and shared it and just said, what is it you want to achieve with this company? And been straight about my expectations and what someone would have to do to get there. He was an ambitious guy and he was capable. And I think I just fell into the trap that so many people do as leaders of thinking that it comes naturally to everyone and that everyone wants to work long hours and solve problems and come up with ideas and help colleagues out and, you know, show leadership. But it doesn't come naturally to some people, but that doesn't mean that they're not capable of it. And really in that situation, it wasn't just this recruitment consultant that lost out. It was also the company, because we lost someone who was capable and ambitious, and he went to do his thing somewhere else, and he became very successful. And so I vowed never to let that happen again. And nowadays I sit down with everyone in the company every 6 months at least to talk about their advancement and talk about what has to happen for them to progress, and just make sure that we're meeting their expectations, and it's a chance for us to share our expectations of them. And that way it kind of makes sure that no one is sitting out there just resenting their job and feeling like they're not moving forward in their career.
Wow, there's a lot in that story. a lot in your learning as well. Well, I think that was beautiful. I mean, I think in the end, the reason why I have people tell the stories is because it's in those stories of not being such a great emotionally intelligent leader that we realize how emotionally intelligent you actually are. Like where there's that awakening that happens.
Absolutely, yeah.
Which is what happened in this case. And all of a sudden now you've transformed into someone who's, you know, sitting down every 6 months and with a specific focus of talking to people about where they want to go in the company. And maybe it's not even just about the company, but where you want to go.
Absolutely.
And how can I help you get there?
It's a
That's
win-win,
huge.
right? I mean, the entire value of our company is driven by our people, and the more successful they are individually, the more successful we'll be. So, you know, there really isn't anything else. It's 100% of the value in my company comes from the people in my office.
I think more leaders need to be thinking of it that way. Sometimes I think it's an executive table, and particularly if it's like a publicly traded company, the views are, you know, there's different stakeholders. And so you have, you know, shareholders and the board, and you have your frontline employees, and you've got your senior leadership team, and you have there's just so many different stakeholders, right? And you have to take into consideration all of those things. Of course, all of those people, all those people, well, a chunk of those people are employees. And so, you know, keeping your eye on the prize with them is critical.
I think it's difficult. I mean, and I think the expectations of leaders are very high these days. I think there's been a few things contribute to that. You know, I've worked with literally thousands of professionals and executives over the course of my recruitment and HR career. And I think I could count on one hand the number of those professional people who thought highly of their own boss. I think most people I work with think that their boss is an idiot. And the thing is, their boss probably isn't an idiot. They're just a human being. They're not some kind of superhero. And if you spend too much time on LinkedIn, you're going to get a very unrealistic expectation of what bosses are able to deliver. You know, there's so much on social media these days. A great boss does this, and the difference between a leader and a boss is this. And, memes about Richard Branson and all these other great leaders, supposedly great leaders who have the luxury of not leading anything much anymore, just being able to spout aphorisms about what great leadership means. But it's very, very difficult to lead people. And I sometimes think that what's needed is actually better followership rather than better leadership. You know, having a dissonant relationship with your own boss is a recipe for disaster and misery. And you're much less, really what has to happen more often is that the employee, you know, this is not how I run my company. I don't demand this of my employees, but really what has to happen is that the employee more often has to accommodate the boss's expectation, because you're swimming upstream by having that kind of dissonant relationship with your boss.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree with you. This with all of the with every source or platform out there, I think there might be definitely a skewed view of like the perfect this and the perfect that. I think the stuff that I talk about, and I hope that we get on this show, is that there just is no perfection. I have 4 kids, and I have to tell them this. One in particular, she is just, I hear the word perfect at least once or twice a day. She wants everything to be perfect. I said,
Yeah,
listen,
right.
that is an enemy to getting stuff done. So
Yeah.
don't even try to worry about perfection. Let's move along. And so, yeah, this idea that bosses are wearing these, wearing the capes and that we're super people, I think it's a bunch of bull. It really is.
You're set up for disappointment, and if that's if that's your standard, then it's not going to happen. But I also think leaders can help lower the expectation of their people, and it's a bit of a difficult balance to walk, because one of the things that people expect in a leader is confidence, which is kind of contradictory to some of the other qualities that they'd like to see in a boss, such as empathy and humility. But a few years ago, we started the management committee to try and be more inclusive as an organization. We brought in all of our team leaders, and we decided all of the big decisions as a company. We meet every 2 weeks to talk about what's going on and make sure that there's good communication within the organization. And the first management committee meeting we held, I just wanted to lay it on the table with all of my guys, and I just said, look, the truth is, I don't have a clue what I'm doing 99% of the time. I'm just making it up as I go along and doing the best I can in the moment. And one of the reasons I wanted to have this management committee was to let other people feel what that's like. Because I don't, people come to me and expect me to have all the answers. And the truth is, I don't. I'm just a human being like them. And I'm going to get it wrong sometimes. So if you're going to hold me to a standard of perfection as a leader, that's, other people the way you would want to be treated. No one in the company wants to be held to that kind of standard of 100% perfection. And that applies to leaders too. It's not realistic, and it's not going to happen. And if you spend all your time complaining about your boss, and you're going to drive yourself crazy, and it's not a recipe for success or advancement or harmony at work.
I love that idea of the management committee, and the fact that you actually curate an environment where they can empathize with you, because they now get to get in your shoes and, like you said, feel like what it feels like not to have the answer all the time, and to have to depend on others to provide some form of answer.
And it's really kind of spread the criticism around the entire office, because previously I would have been making a lot of the decisions that are now made in the management committee. And the way it works is we delegate a different area of the business, and we rotate it around the 6 members of the management committee, so that for a period of time, someone's responsible for IT and internal HR and compliance and that kind of thing. And when those decisions are being made by different people, then it gives everyone that kind of perspective of, I better not criticize this guy's decision, because that's going to be me in 6 months.
Yeah. And I love that, like, even that you're doing that in a smaller company, because obviously larger companies have, senior leadership teams. But they often, all those people happen to be usually end up being the executive level people. But it sounds like what you do is include people that might not be, maybe they are they all senior?
Yeah, they're all team leaders.
Okay.
But they have day jobs, so they're out there making money for the company, right, and running their teams. So it's good for them it's partly a way for them to get experience of the types of activity that they would have to do as CEO of the company, which hopefully 1 or 2 of them will be at some point.
Nice. That's awesome. I love it. So thank you for sharing all of that. And it does provide a different depth. I am one of those people that's on LinkedIn or that writes books about, what leaders can do to keep their people. I don't think it's rocket science. So I definitely don't, perfection is not anywhere near it. I just think it's not possible for any human being to be in that place. So
no, absolutely.
That would be the wrong place to coach from. But I do think there's a lot of things that leaders can do, and they can do things that don't cost anything. And it's really about being human. And
absolutely.
And being human also means we're not perfect. So this idea of you saying, hey, 99% of the time, I don't even have the answer. And I just make this up as I go, already shows that you're more human. That's the stuff that needs to get done, and it didn't cost you a thing.
Yeah, I do career advancement workshops with young professionals quite a lot, and I have this list of 7 heavenly virtues, I call them, the things that companies look for, the personal qualities that companies look for in candidates for advancement within their organizations. And number 1 on the list is humility. You know, the ability to take feedback and criticism with good grace is the number 1 thing that will create success for you. Because if you're closed to that, and I believe that this applies to me too, but if you're closed to feedback, then you're never going to develop professionally, and you're not going to hear the advice that you really need to hear in order to advance within your company. But if you can just go to someone senior in your company and say, tell me what I can do better, and create the space for them to be able to tell you honestly without reacting to it with disgust or opposition, then you're going to hear the things you need to hear to advance.
It's so funny because one of my last questions to you was going to be, for those leaders who could be struggling in their role or just at a crossroads or whatever, what would be a pearl of wisdom, something you might leave them with that gets them through the rest of the week, that makes them, make some tweaks. And I'm not sure if what you just said was one of those nuggets. That was a great one. What might be maybe 1 or 2 pearls of wisdom you would leave them with besides the one you just gave on the feedback, which I think is brilliant?
Yeah, I think it would be, but I think the important thing to realize is that you can make anyone a manager just with a job title, but there's only one thing that can make someone a leader, and that's having followers. And so leadership isn't a choice that you make. You can't just decide to become a leader. Other people have to decide to follow you. And so if no matter whether your team is 2 people or 200 people, if you are to be their leader, the only way that can happen is for them to decide to follow you. I'm a big Game of Thrones fan, as most people are these days. And I think there's a real lesson in leadership buried in the plotline of Game of Thrones. And it's this battle between the 2 different styles of leadership. On the one hand, you've got Stannis Baratheon, who claims an entitlement to the throne and goes around commandeering armies and conquering towns and demanding that people follow him, and frankly just buying an army. He just pays mercenaries to follow him. And then on the other hand, you've got Jon Snow, who doesn't even want to be a leader. He has to be begged to be a leader. And the only reason he becomes a leader is that people want to follow him. And and it works out just as it would, I think, in the corporate world, because Stannis Baratheon doesn't survive because everyone deserts him at the first opportunity, and that's what happens if you try and buy your way or demand your way to leadership. The only way you can win leadership is to be willing to take people somewhere that they want to go.
So that was a great nugget. And I think for those who are listening, this idea of seeking feedback from those around you, don't just be closed off. We all have been there sometimes where it's hard to take sometimes either 360 feedback or boss feedback or coworker feedback or team member feedback. And so taking that feedback and using it to be better. And again, this other idea of we can't just call ourselves leaders. We have to have people willing to follow. And so what are you doing every day to promote people wanting to follow you? I mean, and is it the desire to be the leader that drives you, or is it the desire to help others go where they want to go, as Steve just talked about? So those are amazing. I really appreciate you joining the show, Steve. This has been great.
Not at all.
So for those who are listening and who really got a lot out of this show today, it was short but sweet, and boy, some really good points here. Go ahead and rate it and review it wherever you're listening. Because here's the thing, that algorithm, there's so many leadership podcasts, but we want to be able to differentiate this one. And so if you are rating and reviewing it, it does bring it up on the algorithm, lets people get to it more frequently. I definitely appreciate you listening to the Leadership with Heart podcast, and see you next time. Thank you for listening to the Leadership with Heart podcast. You can grab the show notes by visiting customerfanatics.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter.